It's Ren Presents time. I am your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Hazards of the Old Ones, Part 2, Chapter 12, Pieces in Play. So last week, Carahill and Madame Kylos of Tusk ventured for miles in complete pitch darkness into the heart of the Hazards of the Old Ones. And Madame Kylos found what lies there. An ancient secret held by the Sisterhood of Light, where the elder kind, the people of the League and the Zaphins, were granted immortality while on camera hundreds of thousands of years ago in the, I believe it was either the CX or the DX time epoch. I made this up and I'm not even sure. And the immortality was horrible. You would live forever no matter how injured or consumed with whatever you became. Even if you were just a brain in the pan thirsting for sensory input that would never come, you would be there forever. And that sounds like a damnation that I want no part of. And all the little bits and pieces of you, should they become separated from your person, continue to live and become spiteful as they dream of what they once were. And on camera, they were just these insane, immortal tyrants. You had the sulfids, the solid ones. You had the grundids, the bits and pieces at war with each other over body parts. Ugh. So the sisters, after asking the elders to remove this gift because it was troublesome, to be sure, found that they had to take matters into their own hands and figured out how to suppress this immortality. And the way that they introduce these chemicals, these agents that they discovered, was to basically insert it while having intercourse. And that, again, the sisters program, or giving it to these males, would then pass it into their bloodline, and so on and so forth. Kai had to press on into the heart to collect a bright stone that Carahill needs, and he says, put it into my mouth and stuff it in as far as you can, no matter what happens, no matter what you hear, what you see. And these giant-sized, monstrous sisters who are inside the heart detected Carahill's presence and attacked and did him horrible damage. It was actually hard for me to read that. That was pretty gnarly. It does in fact seem like Carahill is dead, even though Kai was eventually successful and put the jewel into his mouth. And now Tweeter is, with luck, going to try to lead her out of the pitch darkness with all the snares and traps and evil machines that are there to prevent her passage. This week, we move on and continue with characters we haven't seen in a while. Some of you are probably thinking, man, what's wrong with you, mate? What's going on with you? You introduce all these characters and then drop them. You forget about them. I forget about nothing. It's just not time to use them. Well, now is the time. And we reunite with some characters we haven't seen in a while. Learn a few things and move the plot forward. So, let's begin immediately. And I'm looking at the levels from my mic, and it's like hardly moving. It's kind of, I hope I'm not just flapping my gums for nothing. But such is my demonic quest to provide you with quality content. So I will press on, and with luck, my voice is actually being recorded. So let's proceed immediately. Part 2, Chapter 12, Pieces in the Play. Tori Jane of Wham walked through the manor on her way to the study. She was freshly washed, ready for the evening. her pale skin silky and smooth. She wore only a small flower-print silk robe. Her hair and slender feet were still slightly damp from her wash. She had bathed at her leisure in a huge tub filled with rose petals that she had gathered, and washed her long black hair, scenting it with blossoms. She wanted to please her Duke. She remembered not long ago being a black hat painter. She remembered doing terrible things. She recalled her X-shaped temple in the Zaffin city of Wham, how her temple was an accursed, feared place. She remembered the pain she'd inflicted there, and the terror she had inspired. It all seemed like a blurry, strange dream to her, just like the illusions she was so good at creating. Her whole life a long, dark illusion filled with the nightmare images of dying faces and tortured bodies. If her Duke hadn't told her it was all right, if he hadn't told her the things she'd done weren't her fault, then the guilt should have consumed her. Only the last week seemed real. Only her Duke, sitting at her bedside, seemed real. She was eager to put her past life behind her and be forgotten. She had so much to look forward to, she and her Duke. Perhaps soon he'll ask her to marry him. Her life began when she opened her eyes in the dungeon below. She was naked, shackled, surrounded by herbs and plants that made her feel slightly sick and weak. She remembered hating the man, wanting to kill him, desperate to kill him and escape back to Wham and her dark temple. She remembered something bright and silvery with glowing eyes, eyes that reached out and warmed her. She recalled suddenly feeling many things. She wondered where she was. Her arms hurt. She was terribly hungry. What was that smell? And who is that man? She slumped in her manacles, and he freed her, cleaned her, dressed her, and he told her his name, Lord Falsworth, the Duke of Olin. As she lay there, all the hate draining out of her, she told him hers. She wanted to tell him, Tori Jane of Wham. Telling him her name was like lifting a weight off her soul. After that, everything else flowed together. After that, her life began. She was carrying a tray of spirits and mixers. She loved it when her Duke made her a cool drink, and they curled up together in the study or the bedroom or out on the lawn, and he told her stories. Stories of romance and adventure. She loved them. Couldn't wait to share in his adventures herself. Sometimes she sat in the Duke's library and marveled at all the books neatly lined up on towering shelves. She longed for the day she could read them herself. Her Duke was teaching her. He was such a patient man. The Duke told her that this was her library too, that everything he had was hers also, if she wanted it. Oh, how she wanted it. To pick up a book and read it. To train her attention to things other than illusions and killing, and the flowers that they picked together in the garden. Wondrous, simply wondrous. She loved to smell and arrange them. His study, once a drab, airless, lightless place of olive upholstery and cream-painted woods, was now filled with huge moorland vases full of colorful, flowering plants that she cut and potted. The curtains were thrown open, admitting life-giving sunshine. She and her Duke. Her tray was full of colored bottles that clanked together as she walked. She didn't know what was what yet. She couldn't read the labels. She always carefully watched what he was doing when he made the drinks and tried to remember what bottle did what. So she had loaded as much onto the tray as she could from the bar. Let's see. A few splashes from the pink bottle, a long pour from the green bottle shaped like a pear, and a healthy shake should create what her Duke called a martini. What a yummy drink! Oh, the olives. She cannot forget the olives. She wanted to surprise him with the drinks. She will go into the study and she will take the bottles and make him a martini. They will drink their drinks. He'll hold her and tell her a story. Then they'll make love. As Tori approached the door, she thought she could see something crouching in the shadows at the end of the hall. Stopping, she stared, trying to get a better look. "Who's there?" she asked, holding the tray. She wasn't scared, She didn't feel fear per se. Something moved. Something spoke. "Good evening, ma'am. I hope I did not startle you." "You didn't. Who are you? Why are you hiding?" It came out of the shadows and bowed. "My, but you are a vision, ma'am. May I ask your name, please?" "Tori Jane." "Tori Jane of Wham. Well, that is a beautiful name. Will you please tell your Duke that I have come calling on him? The time has come. He'll know what you mean." As Tori reached for the door handle, it spoke again. "I'm sorry," he said. "Why?" she asked. "Because you appear to have washed for the evening, and I'm afraid you'll be heading out soon." The bridge crew gave each other knowing glances. They'd heard that something was up, something interesting. They knew their destination was an unknown derelict ship bearing out of Heron. What was a main fleet vessel like the Seeker doing on a paltry mission like that? That's what the Marines were for. They suspected House Xandar and Princess Marlith. Tense, eager, ready for action, they waited to intercept the ship, wondering if at any moment the fierce, painted face would appear on the cone, as it had so many times in the past, dressed in veils, nearly nude, holding her legendary knife. Davage saw it. Now, everyone, this exercise here today is merely to spare us the drudgery of having to play taxi cab to some stodgy, pedantic admiral. I expect no unusual happenings here and merely wish to assist our marine friends as best we can. We will, no doubt, locate some marginally functional tramp vessel ferrying unfortunate Zaffin refugees. Stay sharp, fly true, and I'm certain this will pass without notice. Sig looked at Dav from her chair. "You really believe that, love?" "Certainly." Sig smiled. "Oh, I see. Too bad nobody else does." As Sig touched upon, none of the crew listened to Dav's speech. They'd heard whispers in the pub and in the mess of a new enemy, a new Xandar princess who wanted to kill the great Captain Davage. They'd heard this princess was some sort of trained weapon, that she'd prepared her whole life to meet Lord Blanchford, kill him. Now that's adventure. That's excitement. None believed such a thing could happen. They had Captain Davage, he of the sight, he of the helm. Captain Davage could not be beat. All they had to do was hold on, do their jobs, and enjoy the show. Full of confidence and hoping for some action, they sailed into the Heron system, ready for whatever. A familiar hush fell on the bridge as the strange black ship appeared on the hollow cone, right where the Marines said it should be. The crew was excited. They remembered Princess Marlith, the battles, the victories, the twisted metal and captured prisoners. The crew thought of the old fights with Princess Marlith with a gleam of nostalgia. Manning their posts, they waited for the usual screen on, the war paint, the bare chest in 3D on the holocone, and the brandished knife that she longed to stick into Captain Davage's chest, the insults and the threats. But there was nothing. A long, shadowy silence from the vessel ahead. Davage stared at the ship. He'd not seen anything like it before. It was large. Huge, actually. Possibly twice as long as the Seeker. It was situated around a central cylinder like a toppled-over column. The cylinder appeared to be segmented at regular intervals. In the center of every 10th segment was a large set of antenna dishes or wings, articulated in a curve and swooping like a bat's wing. There were 10 of these winged arrays, spaced evenly along the length of the cylinder. The ship was dead black, with a slight burnish of brass, lit up by the yellowish light of the Heron Nebula. "For sensing, are you reading anything?" Davage asked. Sassy stared into her view screen. "No, sir, not reading any life signs. Any obvious source of power or propulsion, or any known metals." Davage, as usual, sighted the ship, his glowing eyes lighting up the bridge. None paid any attention except for Sig, who still couldn't resist looking at them. In his sight, he could see the finely detailed exterior of the central cylinder, the delicate structure of the wings, The absolute lack of usual starship activity, no power, no moving parts, and no people. It looks like shadow tech, he said finally. A lot of it. Countess, he said, addressing Sig formally, which she hated. Do you sense anything? She stood up and walked towards the image on the holocone. I don't feel anything here. I need a window. This way, please. Davage motioned for her to step into his office. She did, with a proud gait. Finally, she got to go into his office for something official. They walked in and closed the door. Sig huffed. I wish you'd stop calling me Countess. I am your wife, after all. Just protocol, darling, he said. She kissed him, then looked out the window. The black ship was huge, its size much more apparent through the window than it had appeared on the cone. The large shaft of circular light from the main sensor traveled up and down the ship's length. The illuminated area was just as dark and lifeless as the rest. Sig gazed at it. I'm not sensing any shadow tech. I should be feeling it heavy. Davage cited it again. It has the look of a lot of shadow tech, Sig, but it's rooted. It's not bubbling like shadow tech usually does. If it is shadow tech, it's not like any I've seen before. He glanced up at the ceiling. Com, he said. Com here, sir. Send transmission to the unknown ship. Aye, sir. No reply. Davage thought for a moment. Sig? Oh, now it's Sig. Is it? You're Silvertech. I wonder if you touch the ship with a stream, and it is shadow tech, then there would be a reaction, correct? Yes, I suppose. That's to the hatch, and Sig smiled. No need. She lifted a finger and sent a small stream of silver to the window. It splattered and collected there for a moment, and then a gossamer strand emerged on the other side of the window. She then sent it streaking towards the ship. See, love, Silvertech can find the tiniest of imperfections, even at the atomic level, and move through. She put her free arm around Davage and closed her eyes. It's cold out there. Well, no doubt. The stream reached the ship and touched the surface. Startled, she lurched away from his side. Dav! Sig screamed. It's shadow tech of a type I've never seen before either. A dark wave passed across the ship, and a surge sizzled through the stream into Sig's arm. There was a flash. She clenched her teeth and fell to the floor. Kylos had been crawling for hours, it seemed, though she couldn't be sure. Time here in the dark had no meaning. She was following Tweeter, following the sound of his chirps. She had no idea if he actually could get her out of here or not. Certainly this place would foul his inner workings sooner or later. He was just a toy, a clever bit of Silvertech created by her best friend's sister, to keep her from embarrassing herself in unfamiliar places. A gadget, she had said. Surely he was no match for the ancient evil lurking in the damn dark. The same evil that had kept out all the old Vith heroes, and even the sisters, for centuries. Surely Tweeter was on borrowed time, and so was she. She expected him at any moment to simply keel over and die. But on he went, just as bouncy and cheerful as ever. The dark was shocking, devastating. Every so often she thought she could see light in the distance, and she tried to quicken her pace, but like a shimmering mirage, the light never got any closer. It was just a bit of hopeful thinking, courtesy of her color-starved imagination. Tweeter was hopping along confidently. When he wanted to go left or right, he pecked the walls, and Kai, dirty, exhausted, knee-skinned, followed. She didn't bother to try and walk anymore. Whenever she tried to stand and walk, the unseen ground invariably rose or fell sharply, sending her toppling. It was better just to crawl. She became aware of being exhausted, bone-tired. How far had she crawled? How long ago had it been since she'd eaten her lonely breakfast at Castle Blanchford? She stopped and leaned against a wall. Tweeter, she gasped. Give me a moment, please. Kai's hearing, made acute in the pitch black, picked up the minute sounds of Tweeter hopping toward her. She chirped. Though she couldn't see, she could imagine him looking up at her, patiently waiting for her to follow. She closed her eyes, letting sleep take her away toward lighted passes and friend-filled vistas. Dav and Sig, dear Lady Poe, and Carahill. He was a friend, too. She heard sounds in the distance, a mechanical droning, accented by industrial hammering and other metallic sounds. It was the same clatter of sound she had heard before, far off in the distance. It was a vaguely soothing collection of noises. Though loud, she could easily sleep to it. The sound was getting closer. Tweeter suddenly flew up into her face. She could feel his wings beating in a flurry. She could feel the breeze. What? Tweeter, she said, wanting to sleep. He jumped onto the bridge of her nose and began pecking her cheek. She had a mind to give him a good cuff across the beak. Let me sleep. All I want to do is sleep. The ground began to vibrate. Something was approaching. What had Carahill said? There were not only snares for the gifted here in the hazards. There were machines, too, waiting to fall upon any who might have gotten through. A machine approached. Kai pulled herself from her delirium. The sound was loud. The machine could be upon her at any moment. Tweeter, get me away from this thing! He hopped onto her right shoulder and began pecking her right ear. Right? You want me to go right? She started moving to her right, down unseen passageways toward the nearing machine. When she had gone right enough, Tweeter hopped off her shoulder and got in her hair. Straight. She guessed he wanted her to go straight. She crawled straight. The sound got loud to the point of being deafening. Had to be right in front of her. Tweeter hopped onto her left shoulder and she dove to her left and kept moving. The sound reached an apex. The squeaking of wheels, the rolling of treads, and then it began slowly fading into the distance. Soon it was nothing more than a pleasing industrial drone again. Kai, crawling, smiled. Thanks, Tweets. He chirped in response. Get me out of here, okay? Go ahead and peck my eye out if I start to fall asleep again. Following his lead, Kai crawled on, still forever deep under the hazards of the old ones. Some time later, Tweeter's little silver wings stopped flapping and his chirping was silenced. He stayed quiet for what seemed like a long time. Was this it? Was he dead? She was about to call out to him when her blood froze. Something was nearby in the dark. It wasn't her imagination. Something was there, stirring, huge and rustling. She could feel it. There was a hideous voice.
Come here. Come to me.
It was the ugliest voice she had ever heard. The voice of the devil. It blasted her ears, filling the tunnel. The dirge. The giant sisters, unable to root her out of the dark, unable to trust their machines, were trying to dirge, to command her to come to them. She could feel her muscles clench. She began moving. But wait, what had Dav once told her about the gifts and the Johnnies? Something about the dirge. She knew the dirge was considered a bad gift, a rotten, rude, dirty gift. Using the dirge to force someone to do something they didn't want to do, it tended to create bad feelings. Those dirgists who plied their trade too often found themselves with few friends, lots of enemies, and were generally given a bad time of it. They often ended up in prison. The dirge was best left as a parlor trick, an amusement for children on lazy afternoons.
Come to me. We will make it quick and easy. We command it.
Again, her muscles clenched. Again, she started moving against her will. Wait, that's what Dav had said. The dirge didn't work on Johnnies, only blues. She closed her eyes and relaxed, allowing the massive dirge to paw fitfully at her soul. Formidable, impressive, but doing nothing.
Come here.
Kai wrote it out. There was a silence for a minute or two, and then...
Can you hear our thoughts? Yes, you can, can't you?
The sisters, they were here and they were close. They hadn't given up searching for her. Their eyes had failed them. Their machines roving the tunnels had failed. Their hyper-powered dirge had failed. Now was time for intimidation and threats. She cleared her mind, kept it quiet.
We do not know who you are, or how you have stood where none could stand, or how you resist our dirge, or avoid our mechanical cats. But no matter. Have no illusions. We will find you, and we will determine all your secrets wrung from your living flesh.
Kai leaned against the wall, heard a rhythmic pounding, the huge, dirty footfalls of a giant-sized sister. She was near. She was very, very near, just a few paces ahead.
Come to us. Wait for us. All the exits are being watched. All the passages are being sifted. You cannot get out. Be reasonable. Wait for us.
Her ears, sharpened by hours of pitch black, picked up a faint rasping.
We will make it quick and easy. You have our word. Come to us. We command it.
They couldn't detect her. They were desperate to stop her, to silence her.
Heed not our command. Continue running. And when we find you, we will first kill everyone you have ever known as you watch. Your friends, your family, your loves. All will die and you will be the last. Come to us. End this now. For the sake of the League. End this now.
More pounding. The sister couldn't be more than a few feet away. Kai could hear her ragged breaths, could smell her exposed innards. She heard a claw scraping the ground. She heard a sniffing.
You were here at one point. Yes, you were. I can smell you. Could it be you are a Johnny? Yes, a Johnny. A person from Onaris. We hadn't considered. We will have to remedy.
More sniffing. You
are from Onaris. Yes. I see golden fields. I see serfs working in the sun. You are a serf too. Know this, Johnny. Serf. We will eventually determine your identity. We will. We've all the time in the world. You could be safe in your bed 1,000,000 miles away, and it matters not. And when we find you, woe to you and those you love.
Kai quietly drew her SK, scooted forward a bit, and was ready to fire, ready to shoot the sister nearby. Whether a giant sister, a master of life and death, could be gunned down, she didn't know. She cocked her SK, and the sound was huge in the dark. Ch-ch. She heard the sister grunt audibly. The poundings approached at a run. Kai rolled to the other side of the passage, and a moment later the sister was standing right where she had been, clawing at the ground. Little bits of dust and crushed stone rained down on her.
Johnny, we will trample in your flesh.
Kai aimed where she thought the sister's torso might be. She put pressure on the trigger. She could feel the sister's rage. She could feel the pure malice streaming out of her. These sisters hidden in the cursed dark, stained by the black abyss, doing work they felt necessary and just, had become sour and become paranoid, and to keep their secret, the things they would do to her flesh, the agony they would inflict. They had become monstrous, body and soul, just like the black abyss before them. Just a little more pressure and the SK will go off, and then Kylos of Tusk will come face to face with her eternity, swallowed up in the hazards of the old ones, never to see the light of day again.
Womalar.
Came a frenzied thought from far off.
How can this be? There is a Womalar at the gates, and it has P3847.
P3847, North Passage. Hurry, sisters, hurry. The Womalar is powerful.
The sister pounded the wall of the passage in frustration.
We know you are here, little intruder from Onaris, cowering in the dark. Worry not, we shan't be long. We will be back for you.
And
when we get hold of your blessed form at last, your torment will be the basis for a whole new branch of suffering. The gates are watched, and you cannot exit them. Upon your flesh, we will know how our fences were cut.
There was a clatter of ceramic tiles smashing and breaking under the sister's fist. Then a second later, she was gone, striding down the passage to go get the Womalar. Kai sat there for a moment and caught her breath. The sisters, just by smell, could somehow piece together who she was. After just a few moments, they had already determined she was a Johnny from Onaris. How long after that would they know she was from Tusk? How long after that would they learn her identity and kill everybody? Her family? Her husband? Dav and Sig? Perhaps there was no escape from the hazards. Perhaps this was a one-way trip. Maybe Carahil knew that all along. Something nuzzled up against her face. It chirped. Hey, Tweeter! Tweeter! She'd forgotten about him yet again. She thought he was gone, dead, swallowed up at last in the presence of the enraged sister. But no, here he was, unseen in the dark, but felt nonetheless. She petted him for a moment, then he fluttered off and chirped. Slowly she holstered her SK and crawled after him. He came back, fluttered in her face a moment, and then flew away. Apparently, he wanted her to hurry. She stood and stumbled ahead, careful of the rises and falls, her unseen legs unsteady. Tweeter, chirping, turned to the left. Feeling for the wall, she followed. Light far ahead, another mirage. No, there was light in the distance. A distant dark blue smudge. She looked down and could see her legs in the ground in the brackish light. Ahead, she could see Tweeter's silver light, the relief of the Magravine tile standing out sharply in a ring as he flew. She looked back. The thick, unnatural darkness ended several paces to the rear. She quickened her gait. She ran. She will get back to civilization, contact Dav, warn him of danger, and then she'll probably kill herself to protect him, to keep the sisters from discovering her. She ran out of the mouth of the tunnel. It was night. The stars were out. The distant mountains lined up like lavender shells under the dusty sandbag of starlight. Stars. Fresh air. Peter ahead, glowing as a candle. She ran, though her heart and legs demanded respite. Where was she? Where could she go? Where was the nearest town or estate? It didn't matter. Anywhere but here was better. Suddenly, a vise came down upon her. She'd gone about 300 yards from the tunnel when she was stopped cold. She was held fast in place, defying gravity. She dropped her SK and it hung in the air, held fast just like she was. TK'd. She couldn't move a muscle. She squirmed and struggled. She couldn't breathe. She was caught in an invisible death grip from top to bottom. Panic took her. The sisters. They had her at last. Sig, are you all right? Davage cried, picking her up off the floor. He glanced at the wall and sighted through it. The ship. He sighted the black ship moving, firing black weapons. He sighted the Seeker being latched onto and squeezed. Lieutenant Verlin, he yelled towards the ceiling. Get us out of here, maximum speed. Lieutenant Larson, mark bearings and fire. He loosened Sig's gown. Her heart, it wasn't beating. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Hospitalers, to the captain's office! He could feel the ship hauling around. Several thuds, canister missiles exiting the ship. Something was hitting the ship, not Cassegrains, rather something big and jarring. Captain, Verlin cried over the comm. The ship has been grappled. We are held in place. The ship shuddered again. "Captain," came Larson's voice. "Canisters have impacted the enemy vessel, but damage cannot be assessed." "Keep firing. Evasive maneuvers." He couldn't leave Sig's side. His wife, his beloved Sig, was dying in his arms. He couldn't open her mouth to breathe for her. Her mouth was clenched shut. The door flew open, and Inez, his Hospitaller Samaritan, entered with 2 chancellors. "Inez, it's Sig. Her heart's not beating." Inez knelt down and pulled out a scanner. "What happened?" She was scanning the unknown vessel and screamed and fell to the floor. Inez moved his scanner about. "Elder's balls, Dav. Her body is flooded with energy. That's what's keeping her heart from beating." The Seeker rocked again and was listing to port. The chancellors opened her gown and quickly affixed several electrodes from a small device to her chest. "Armed," one said. "Fire," the other said. They jolted Sig, trying to shock her heart into beating. Nothing. Inez scanned. She's still getting shocked. Energy's flooding her nervous system. The chancellors tried to lift her chin and breathe for her, but she was rigid like a statue. Shocked from where?" Davage asked. "How?" "Well, I don't know. You tell me." The ship's list grew more pronounced. More thuds. "Captain," Verlin cried over the comm, "we cannot break free." Davage thought a moment. "Wait, Inez, here, look here." He looked to her small, elegant hand, and there was a tiny strand of silver tech. She was still connected to the monster ship outside. He took the strand and tried to break it with his hands. He pulled and pulled. It didn't budge. He could feel the shocking power coursing through the strand. He tried again. Still nothing. Inez scanned it. "Dav, this strand has to go. I'm reading massive energy surging through it." Another thud from outside. Inez pulled a pair of cutters out of his pockets. He tried to cut the strand and got the shock of his life, the cutters flying out of his hand and sticking into the door. Davage stood and unsettled his carg. "Stand back, Inez. Everybody stand clear." Inez and the chancellors backed away. Davage cleaved down with his heavy, coppery carg. The silver tech strand, no thicker than a hair and as delicate as a spider silk, met the cutting blow and resisted. It didn't break. He gritted his teeth as the shocking power of the strand flowed up the carg into his body, blowing his hat off. He staggered. Recovering, wheeling back, Davage raised and lowered his carg again, this time with full strength. It cleaved the silver strand and made a deep furrow in the floor. The silver snapped with a high-pitched tink. Sig, free of the shock, went limp. The chancellors set their equipment back up and hit her again. "Armed. Fire. Beat. Good beat." Inez removed the electrodes and began massaging her chest, and after a moment, Sig exhaled roughly. He got his scanner out and waved it around. "Looks good, Dav. Her heart rate is returning to normal. Get her to the dispensary, Inez, and don't let her leave." Sig took a few pained breaths. "Dav," she said weakly, "what's going on?" "You're going with Inez to the dispensary." "What?" I'm all right, Dav. I don't want to go with Inez. I want to stay with you." Davage picked her up and handed her to Inez. "Get her to the dispensary, and that's an order." Sig walked out. "Dav!" Sig cried. "Dav!" She weakly kicked in his arms. Davage steeled himself and headed for the bridge. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 12, Pieces in Play. So a lot of things going on in that chapter. We visit 3 distinct places. You remember Tori Jane of Wham, the black hat that the Duke of Olin had captured and had in his dungeon and was trying to turn her as Captain Davage had turned Sig, but it didn't work. And he had to rely on Carahil to come and free her from the Black Abbess's clutch. And we find out what happened after that. That she, like Sig, had been denied most of her range of emotions throughout her life. Black hats in the Black Abbess's clutch can only feel rage and hate. Everything else is suppressed and kept bottled up for however long they've lived, which probably is a long time. Free of the Black Abbess's clutch, all these emotions just come bubbling to the surface, and it's overwhelming for them, and they're basically a brand new person, very childlike, very inquisitive and impressionable. And there's also a thing with black hats where if they tell you their name, that opens their soul to you. So she told the Duke her name and made her very pliable, very eager to get to know him and to forgive him for having locked her up in a dungeon. And as her experiences proceeded, as she began to discover herself as a person, she finds she likes flowers and planting flowers, agriculture, horticulture. She likes mixed drinks that the Duke makes for her and likes listening to stories. Like all black hats, Tori Jane of Wham is illiterate. Black hats never can read. When they're freed from the Black Abbess's clutch, they are always illiterate and have to be taught. Sig had to be taught. Cat had to be taught. And so too was Tori Jane of Wham. Though she's fascinated by the Duke's libraries with all the books there, and she it's one of her goals, one of her dreams, to be able to read these books on her own. And they're usually a quick study. The Duke is teaching her how to read, so she'll be reading those books probably in no time. Then we see the Seeker as Captain Davage encounters this strange ship in space. Sig examines it with her silver tech and takes a massive jolt that just about kills her. And the Seeker is currently grappled with Shadow Tech. Things aren't looking good at the moment. And then we are back in the hazards of the old ones with Kai, with Tweeter leading her through the dark out to the open. Kai encounters a sister in the dark, and the sister is threatening and creepy and is catching wind of her scent. And the sisters have very powerful noses, and they can interpret a lot about you from your scent. And it was already just after a few moments of sniffing, she had determined she was from Onaris, and a serf, a peasant, basically, and wasn't too kind in her words. But then the presence of a Wummalar, whatever that is, diverted the sister, giving Kai the ability to follow Tweeter out of the hazards into the starlight. Though as soon as she got out, she got captured in a full body TK, which isn't good. There's no way of getting out of that, so Kai is basically held fast at the moment. So that was that chapter. Next chapter, we continue as things are heating up all over the place. Chapter 13, The Goshawks. So we caught up with the Duke of Olin, with Tori Jane of Wham, a newly reformed black hat, with Sig getting shocked, Seeker getting grappled, and Kai escaping the hazards only to be captured in a TK. Next week, we will continue with this craziness. Part 2, Chapter 13, The Goshawks. And until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.